Hello, Felix. As promised, I've put together some photos for an essay that I'm going to videotape, and this is the beginning of it. So bear with me as I go through the mechanics, the housekeeping, and you can get a little hint of where I'm going. So Felix on his 80th birthday. So this is where we first met. Felix, you were standing right on the top step here, having knocked on our door, and this nice young boy was there to greet us. We had just moved in, and there you were, roughly at that age. And when we were back visiting together and roaming our old neighborhood, we went by your old house, the Monticello mansion. And here were a couple of boys, a few boys out front, and you engaged them in conversation. Now, back in those days, we were still listening to Uncle Wally read the funnies every Sunday morning, at least I was. But we very soon became enamored of a cartoonist named Gallagher. And he was quite an accomplished guy. He won the National Cartoonist Society Gag Cartoon Award twice, but look at the 14 years apart. So that showed an endurance deserving of our devotion to him. I'm just going to do what Uncle Wally did. I'm going to read the captions, and all you have to do is look at the cartoon. So the librarian there is whispering, "Fire." And here's the commentator and the reader of the news saying, "And that's your world picture as it looks from here." Look what was doing all that honking. How's business? Obviously very bad, because all the baby turtles are gigantic, as are the fish and the chicks. Hey, you guys are supposed to be in Chicago. Watch me give this guy a thrill. The parrot says, "Unfortunately, as is the case with most parrots, I am rather cliche-ridden. I'd hate to have it in my record that I was killed in the ring." Help! I have a few words to say to you men as soon as the effigy committee has finished. Number 5 looks like he's ready. Scratch it yourself. She's got the screaming memes. That's a clever idea, but will it wear out? Does the consumer have to buy a new one every now and then? You've got to consider the marketing aspects of the thing. I see the syndicate let you go. Boy, he can really play poker. And going through and searching for these cartoons, I realized there's a visit maybe the two of us can take some time to Columbus, Ohio. There's a cartoon library and museum, and Gallagher left all his papers to this museum. Interestingly enough, when I was searching, they happened to be running concurrently the social and political satire of Walt Kelly's Pogo, another one of our favorites. And here Kelly looks at the role money plays in politics. And here, this is one of his collected works, which I have all of them still. Um, I had intended to try reading them to the grandkids, but a few false starts and I haven't tried again. Um, Here we are at one of my birthday parties, and here you are reaching across the table to help me maybe open a present. Um, I think this is Van Meter, Alan Stanford. Um, and here you and Lyle are at the Vogue Theater. Here I'm remembering all the Saturday matinees I went to. I think you mentioned you also went to another theater, maybe the Uptown. But the only memory I have is being dropped off at the Vogue and coming back. And of course, there's this star there. And we learned that some big names were involved. They knew the owner, the new owner who built the Vogue, and Mary Pickford was one of those that suggested the name. The actual dedication was attended by a cowboy star, Ken Maynard, and Carol Lombard and her boyfriend Clark Gable were said to be there. They say there were 26 other movie stars, all with Indiana connections, who signed that star. And I'll just zip right through them, lickety split. Irene Dunn, Fred Astaire, Gary Cooper, Marjorie Reaver, Dick Powell, Myrna Loy, Don Amici, John Barrymore, Tyrone Power, Ginger Rogers, William Powell, Barbara Stanwyck, George Raft, Bing Crosby, Monty Blue, Joan Blondell, Shirley Temple, Alice Faye, Loretta Young, Bob Burns, Claudette Colbert, Francis D., Sonia Henney, Richard Dix, and Bobby Breen. Uh, Lyle was a little skeptical that all those had strong Hoosier connections, but all this came out of a book by Raymond Featherstone, who lived at 54th and Park. I think that was the last of a series of homes like my family. He moved every time his father got a promotion, as you pointed out in your sociology class. But he wrote this whole book about our neighborhood, which is quite a piece of good fortune. I think this is at 54th and College. Um, Ultimately, I moved with my family over to New Jersey, but that was just a couple of blocks more, and we remained good friends, played basketball together. Um, School 84. So you and I had the fortune of going back in 2014 because you'd missed the 2009 50th visit with the whole gaggle of our classmates. But this was just you and me, and we were treated like royalty because you were an educator. And we saw new signs. The signs were in Spanish. There was a peace sign, quite different than the school we attended. The kids making the peace sign in 2009. Um, and when we went in 2009, we noticed half the kids were African American. 2014, it was a little bit different. I'll talk about that. Um, the traffic force was a little bit different than when you and I were on the traffic force. In an active Spanish class, and here you are with Principal Collier and the Spanish teacher. It was very heartening to see the ethnic composition of the teachers, the Mexican flag, uh, the computer class, um, And here we are in the third grade. I think this is the classroom where we spent most of the time. And this little charming girl asked us if we had read Charlotte's Web. The teacher took the book, opened it up, and said, no, this book was written 3 years after these gentlemen were in the third grade. Um, Here you are, I think, with the librarian. Um, and again, we see evidence of multiculturalism here, the yin and the yang of Chinese culture, and again, the political peace symbol. A Confucian classroom, they're actually learning Chinese characters. Uh, and then we both had fond memories of Ms. Groff. What a wonderful music teacher she was. And so we happened to mention that to the music teacher then, and she went and pulled out a holiday concert that had been recorded for us. And it was wonderful, just kind of going over the names of the songs that we sang. And this was, it was called the Joseph J. Bingham School at that time. More about that in a second. You go on to Facebook and follow these people somebody had, and this was Ms. Groff in later years. Um, and we saw one of the teachers sported all these bumper stickers on would have been unheard of in our day, obviously. And here is our day. Me in the back of the class U sitting adjacent next to Ralph Lemke and Joanne Prine. It's amazing looking at these faces, how their names just pop out. Um, and here was our graduation picture, a little bit more close up though for the key players. You sitting next to Evie Stone, with me standing in the second row next to Joanne Prine, and behind Mary Jane Randolph. And here's Gracie sitting next to Evelyn. And then Lyle sent us an article about the snobby 84 group. And the story behind that is when we were there in 2009, we learned that the 84 had become a magnet school because so many of the neighborhood parents were sending their kids to private school, essentially abandoning the public school system. When it became a magnet school, it became a very good school. And all of a sudden there was remorse, and the local neighborhood families wanted to get their kids back into this excellent school. They were allowed to come back partially through a lottery, but that lottery had been liberalized, making it easier for neighborhood kids to get in. And something that kind of spoiled the mission of the idea of the magnet school. And that was an ideology that Ms. Collier shared. I think she had come there specifically because it was a magnet school. So the teachers were fighting against the attempts of the local parents to get back into the local school. And Lyle was applying the word snobby to the local parents that weren't going along with this magnet school concept. And here you are with Principal Collier, who was quoted in the article. We found her to be a very engaging and enlightened principal. So here's our gang. I put this up, just this is Doc Stone, and I think he was the official chaperone of our group. And here's Evie, feeling the power of having her father as the chaperone, flipping the V signal. which was at that point victory. This is before Richard Nixon. And here's our gangs of girls sitting there, close up here of Evie. Here's me. I couldn't find you in this one. Um, okay. Um, and then here are some of us later at outside of the restaurant on the Meridian Strip there. Um, and that was fun. The '84, both times. So each of the reunions. But here's the intersection I want to dwell on a little bit. 54th and College, and here was Silver's Pharmacy was on this corner, and you and I hung out in there because this was where we bought our comic books. And I just and a Mad magazine came out, and we were enamored of that, of course. And when we went back, I just noticed there was this interesting sign above Sam's Gyros right next door to where Silver's had been. And it's a guy with no legs steering a bike with a guy with no arms in the back, and we believe in teamwork. And my comment to in general was, yeah, I don't think we would have a sign like this in California. Um, and for me, it reflects kind of a zany humor in at least in northern Indianapolis. Maybe it was all of Indianapolis. But there were three luminaries that grew up in our community. This is Dan Wakefield. This is Dave Letterman, and of course, Kurt Vonnegut. And I mapped out where these people were from. The green X's chart my family's progress along 54th Street. We started off in Roslyn near the swamps, Bacon Swamp. And then we moved to Delaware, where I first met you. You are here, and the black X is your house. But Letterman grew up at 55th in Indianola, a scant block and a half from our first house. Dan Wakefield was at 61st and Winthrop. And I can't be sure where Vonnegut lived. I put the X there because Vonnegut used this address in Cat's Cradle. And one of the characters, an important character, lived there. And I've wondered, either he lived there, or a relative lived there, or a good friend lived there. So and we know Vonnegut's hardware store, so we know he lived somewhere up there. And here's the distance between our starter home on Roslyn and the intersection where Letterman grew up. And this is Bacon's Swamp behind our house. And Wakefield, it's interesting, he has moved back to Indianapolis. I think you and I have enjoyed Indianapolis, but he enjoyed coming back so much that he came back to stay. When he wrote Going All the Way, Kurt Vonnegut predicted that he could never come back to Indianapolis, maybe just for the 500, but probably not even that, because his social commentary was so scathing. Not so, he moved back, and this is him frequenting the Red Key, his favorite watering hole, which I think is around 52nd Street in College, if I'm not mistaken. And so he's become a celebrity in retirement. Here is other influences besides the smart people that lived in our neighborhood. Here is Harry and you and Gordon. Um, and I throw in Harry because of his humor and his comedy, which I think has entertained us over the years, um, and continues to entertain us. You're the three of us on the High Life. This might be Kathleen. Um, but I throw him in because of the Dawson Comedy Company. They showed this to me on one of our visits, and I asked Ev to run it down, and she did. So the Dawson Comedy Company, his grandfather, also known as Harry, um, was an entertainer. And here are the different guises, some of them in blackface as part of a minstrel show. Um, but he made a life out of that. Uh, and here he is in a more serious pose, uh, Harry's grandfather. And I think some of that spirit comes down through Harry to us. There's something about Indiana. Um, and here's Harry demonstrating that wit early and hanging out, the three of us again. And Harry dressing up as a rocket for one of the basketball games. And that spirit kind of lives on. If you look real closely, you're on Evie's right, playing a visual prank on your old friend, Harry Dawson. I love this picture. I love it. Um, and then Harry and I, we've traveled a lot together, and whenever we got the chance, we would do a little goofy stuff. Evan Iko couldn't stop us. Um, but we've dated. Now, for some reason, we're all in the same picture. These are two different pictures spliced together, but here we are. The Joe and Jane dance. And for some reason, your date later was chasing me when I came back to graduate from California. But here was the Key Club, and Harry again demonstrating his alpha male characteristics and leadership ability. Here's Dickie and Lyle, Steve Van Meter, me, you. I want to just indulge you a little bit on, again, on the Ku Klux Klan. God knows we've talked about it a lot. But Joseph J. Bingham, interestingly enough, it's no longer called the Joseph J. Bingham School. And I don't know when this happened. He went on to become a prominent educator, even though he had to testify in the treason trials in Indianapolis in 1864. Unbelievably, this was still allowable show and tell in the late 50s. But here is a transcript from the treason trial. And Bingham is being asked to explain why he accidentally joined the Order of the American Knights. This was a descendant organization from the Knights of the Golden Circle, a Southern organization. And they had an offshoot called the Sons of Liberty, who were Southern sympathizers pre-Civil War. And death sentences were handed out to people in those organizations. Bingham himself was just a witness but he was a witness because he had business connections to some of the real members. Um, so the, the practical thing for us in racial relationships was one of our heroes, Oscar Robertson. And we only later learned how the two championships that we witnessed, um, they were denied the same access to the circle as other white championship teams. Now, the details of that we don't need to go into, but they certainly felt it. I just want to make a connection, a little known connection between the Hoosiers, the Milan Indians. And so Attucks won in 55 and 56, but it was Milan's year in 1954. And to get to the championship game, they had to go through Crispus Attucks in the semifinals. Little known fact. But this reparations were made when the city fathers asked Oscar to be the marshal for the 500. And he said, only if we get the fire engine ride around the circle with the whole team that's still around and all the cheerleaders. And that's what happened. Um, you and I talked about why Robertson didn't stay in Indiana for college, whether it was bad taste from that episode. But you found some information that it might have been Branch McCracken and the way he talked to Robertson offended him. And then Dan Wakefield. He has written an essay recently, Old White Guy Gets Woke. And I remember we were talking about this mural that has the Ku Klux Klan in it. I found it and made a copy of it. So coming to terms with the Ku Klux Klan, Lyle has kept us informed. New book that came out by a guy named Madison, and about the Klan and coming to terms with it. Here's a headline. Yeah, you could blame him, but there had to be a suitable soil for him to uh, uh, have it go on. Um, and here we are conferring, obviously something very important at a orientation for the feminine frosh with Alan Stanford. And here's a cluster that includes you and me. The senior class elections, we ran against each other. I lost. And I've often wondered if I had won, whether I would have gone to California. And if I had not gone to California, would I have gone to DePaul? And what would my life have been like? Who knows? The contingencies of life. But here are the winners, and conferring as you always did down by the White River. On my side, I went on to California and decided to go to Stanford. It was just the thing to do. And I wound up in Berlin, and I mention it because you and Gordon came to visit me. One of the few people that did. I'd say I think really outside of the people that were scheduled to go for Stanford, you were the only visitor. So you had a curiosity, and I hung out. I crossed Checkpoint Charlie, which is what that last picture was, a lot. and I had my adventure, met some German kids, hung out with them, and had a big adventure that I think I've told you about. We don't need to go into. But then there were two gaps. So I saw you and Gordon in 1962, but I didn't see you again until 1972. And then here's a 37-year gap where we were both involved in family and profession. And I'm putting in your own quote from this morning in your letter. You're a wordsmith, so I couldn't say it any better about the reanimation of our old friendship that helped uh, uh, ameliorate the regret for the 37 years that we missed each other's company. Um, and we reconnected in 2009 in Lyle's kitchen. We both remember it vividly. And Kathleen, meeting her and seeing how well you two were working together, the common interests. And it was as with Lyle, to see how you and Lyle were both so happy with your mates. Um, so we learned about how similar our taste was. And I remember specifically talking about It's a Wonderful Life, and you love it. So of course, when I was in Seneca Falls, we went to the national park celebrating the Women's Conference in the 1840s. But right down the street, you see this sign. Is wait a minute, what's going on? So Seneca Falls is trying to draw in the tourist trade, and they're saying, well, we're not exactly Bedford Falls, but we're probably pretty similar to what Capra had in mind. And so we went into the It's a Wonderful Life Museum and spent a lot of time in there with this very detailed exhibition, very busy, more busy than most museums in this day and age. With all the possible memorabilia that you could come up with. This was the uh, museum director, um, a very engaging fellow, and obviously dedicated to his subject. I'm sure you and he could have talked for hours on end. Uh, Interestingly, that the AFI top 100 movies, It's a Wonderful Life is only 186, which I disagree with. It's very life affirming. Also, even lower is The Magnificent Ambersons, a Orson Welles production. Um, and we learned when Lyle drove us around that the Magnificent Ambersons, the setting had been at Woodruff Place. And the uh, maybe a house much like this um, was what Booth Tarkington had in mind. Um, so this is Orson Welles looking at through the camera, spacing out how he was going to choreograph. And the movie starts off just with pictures. Now, the movie is on a set in California. It wasn't filmed in Woodruff Place, but they found a typical house that Booth Tarkington described, and Orson Welles just kept the camera focused on it, but changed the season. So in winter, you get a horse-drawn sleigh. So the transportation was at the time of horses. But then in came the trolley and the streetcar, first horse-drawn. And in those days, the rules of chivalry were not dead, that there was a certain communal experience of going on a public trolley. And so, in parallel, it's of interest that you and Lyle have dug up the fact that the streetcar lines were extended to Broad Ripple in 1894. And then the trolley park, the White City, was built in 1902, but tragically burned to the ground 2.5 years later when a uh, display meant to be an opium den to demonstrate how uh, opium addicts lived, uh, actually caught fire. It was the center of the conflagration. Um, and the story, of course, of the magnificent Ambersons is the invention of the automobile. Tinkerer is a part of the new entrepreneurial class that clashes with the old aristocratic one. And at one point, the Amberson heir, no good heir, lazy, he disparagingly uh, uh, says the automobile is a useless nuisance. But interestingly, Booth Tarkington doesn't say he's all wrong. And he has the Joseph Cotton character admit that it's not going to increase the beauty or the condition of men's souls. But the, the, the Joseph Cotton character, who is the entrepreneur, the Henry Ford character, goes on to say that it's too late to turn back. They've come. It's going to affect war and peace. And people's minds will suddenly work differently. So it's a very complex take, offering both sides of the issue. Of course, if we could go back 100 years, knowing what we know now, we could contribute to that dialogue. Um, Interestingly enough, there's an in joke that Orson Welles put into the movie, a headline from the fictional Indianapolis Daily Enquirer, and it's owned by Charles Foster Kane. And here it shows a cartoon of all the traffic acts, the victims of traffic acts, and the governor getting involved in this scandal. But Indianapolis wasn't the only place that lost trolley parks. Um, the two cities that I've been most involved with here in California, San Francisco, they had the Sutro Baths. Adolf Sutro built a trolley line all the way out for families to go on weekends and go to the really ornate Sutro baths, indoor swimming attached to the ocean. This is the North Shore of the San Francisco Peninsula. And this is another view of the Sutro railroad line. And here looming in the background are the baths, very ornate. Gone, totally gone, just the base. The Once automobiles came in, there was no place to park out there. It just never would work. And then in LA, the famous red cars, the a very dense network of trolley cars all throughout the city that had they not been torn out, LA would have had a much more um, uh, a comfortable future. Um, so this is Union Station, and if you'll indulge me just for a little bit of my own personal ramblings, the connection to you was I was never supposed to get there. I was supposed to take a flight and join you in Iowa City, and we were going to drive to Indianapolis, but because of a storm, um, uh, that was not to be, and I had to take a midnight flight to uh, Indianapolis. Had a very hard time getting a hotel room, but when I woke up the next morning, I was right across from the Union Station. So I said, "What the hell? You weren't going to be there for another 8 hours or so." So I indulged myself in downtown Indianapolis and wandered over to the Union Station, which had been converted to a hotel. This is a picture of the old Union Station lobby that I remember well, with all its exhibitions in the back. And here it is today, a uh, a conference center. Um, and the hotel has preserved some tracks upstairs and preserved the boxcars, turned them into actual hotel rooms, sprinkled around these ghost statues all around to recapture the ambiance of what it was in its day. And it's upstairs because to prevent traffic congestion, each line had an elevated entrance into different floors of the uh, building. And so to go up, I had to get to the track, I had to walk up to the tracks. And I know this station very well because every summer my parents put me on the train to go to Cincinnati uh, uh, to stay with my cousin. We went to summer camp. And I figured as long as I was there, I'd do something I'd never done. I would climb the Circle Monument, which I did. The last thing I'm going to bore you with is a recurrent dream I have. The recurrent dream is it's late at night. I'm in downtown Indianapolis, uh, uh, and I have no idea how to get home. And I can't find the right bus. Um, and so I decided I've got to get out to 54th and College to meet you. I decided, okay, I'll investigate and I'll take the college line all the way from downtown out this direction. And I'll get off at 54th and walk up to our Airbnb at 55th and College. And here's the route that I took. And uh, this is midway in the path. And I was wondering if it would exercise my recurrent dream. And it did, I'm happy to report. Um, the other thing about our old neighborhood that we were never quite sure how to explain was the canal. So going into that history, particularly with Lyle, we figured out that this was an extension of the same canal that has been part of the downtown refurbishment. Learning that whole story and how it related to this un, un, understood phenomenon in our old neighborhood was just fascinating. Um, the other thing that was fascinating along the canal, we see some Muslims coming, and I snuck this picture, maybe disrespectfully. Um, and that kind of reminded me what I'd seen at the airport, a Muslim prayer room. Huh. That's interesting. And what a contrast this was. I happened to meet Mark Lubbers because he now lives in that house on New Jersey where I'd lived. And he was a political advisor, um, mainly to Mitch Daniels, but he's also an author. Um, and he was telling me at the time he was writing, investigating a book about how in the 1920s, um, the city fathers did not want automotive mass assembly lines because it would have meant the influx of Arab immigrants who were the active wave coming from the failing Ottoman Empire at the time. And we kind of know that. I think we've both known Syrian immigrants and their story, and that touches a little bit on this interesting theme, which was a little bit about racism and the color of skin. It kind of dovetails with that. Another thing we had in common was our love of Frank Capra, and you had some academic interest in him. I remember the details of that. But we spent a whole afternoon in the Vonnegut Museum. This is the new one. The old one was down on the canal. And there we found things that we could relate to that Vonnegut had said. Um, and what we learned there was one of the founders of Mad Magazine said that Vonnegut's subversive anarchy, um, was part of his inspiration to join in the creation of Mad Magazine. And this is a cover that I photographed at the Vonnegut Museum. Um, we both like to travel, and I think Vonnegut did too. Um, and you bonded with the um, director of the museum or the docent, and had quite a long conversation with him that you shared with me. Um, and we saw his family tree. We learned the family tragedies um, that affected his writing. Um, and his philosophy, I think, resonated with both of us. But he was Indianapolis through and through, whether he lived at 49th and Meridian or not. he he uh, he acknowledged it in this remarkable statement. And um, this quote was from a economist review of the museum talking to the director, who said of Indianapolis, there's a lack of arrogance here, a humility that makes it into his prose. And I think that's basically true. That's something I'm getting more in touch with. Um, and the other interest that we shared was Hemingway, and I was pretty sure I had found something that would interest you. It was travels in Slovenia, a small town in Slovenia, not far from the big battlefield where Hemingway himself had been an ambulance driver. It was on the east side of a big ridge that was where the battle was fought, and this village claimed that Hemingway came there and wrote Farewell to Arms. And you informed me that Hemingway had never been in Slovenia. So we had a lot to talk about, and we had remarkable days together, wandering the city, rediscovering it. Um, and as usual, you were your gallant self, your same gallant self that you'd been in the third grade, um, and assisting wherever, chatting with whoever wanted to chat. Uh, and here you are in front of the your nemesis, the NCAA. It's in the news recently, uh, and this spun off into a larger group of us taking a road trip and going to Dickie Kahn's vacation home in the Pecos Mountains. Lyle, showing that same subversive anarchy, played a little trick on me. But and then he played a trip on everybody. Um, and so this is kind of at the end of the retreat. Aiko and Ev joined us. They'd been in a spa, and we were going to go on for a longer trip through the Southwest, which we did. The great thing I remember about this is you and I had a big argument about what counts as Mediterranean cuisine, and all I can remember is that Ev and Aiko supported my definition. Uh, and then finally to meet Kathleen and see Kathleen and Aiko bond, um, and to revisit with our old friend Harry. And we had a very remarkable, wonderful vacation in New York. And we spent some time with them, but you, me, and Aiko, on one occasion, I can't remember if it was that trip or not, you spent a lot of time with Aiko in the art gallery. I think I was kind of at home hanging with Harry, who wasn't able to go out, as I recall. And she certainly um, partook of your wisdom uh, in academia, um, and uh, here we were. So I was there for part of it. I'm going to have to review the exact choreography of this trip. You'll no doubt correct me, and I invite that on a number of things I may have misspoke. Um, and here you and I are at the David H. Koch Plaza. Uh, uh, and this is a restaurant that we went to, the ambiance of which I thought was quite remarkable. Um, and here, this led to our visiting you in Iowa City, and here you're taking us to a Frank Lloyd Wright a rural home. Um, so just returning to the reunion where the event 2009 where we bonded, and again in 2014, and again in 2019, and God willing, 2024. Just hanging with our friends. This is Bobby Jeffries, who lived across the street from me on Roslyn. So we're kind of coming full circle here. Uh, and one of my friends, I told him he's my history guru. And I just want to say he enjoyed reading my accounts. We email a lot. And he says that much meaning lies just beneath the surface of American life, if only you know where to look and how to be interested. Save me the Vonnegut quotes. And so I'll end with this the same way I ended with Lyle. Um, I'm very proud to be a Hoosier, especially since I've had a chance to reconnect with my roots, and a lot of that is due to you, my good friend. So happy 80th birthday to you. And with that, I will end. So long, buddy.